Hello, you are listening to How to Be Irish with me, Una Hershey, and we're back here for another episode as part of season 2. This guest today and this topic I have had on my mind since last season, all of last season as well. In fact, it's for everybody. It's for all ages. There might be something that people might not have heard of before, or you might have heard of everything here before. But either way, we're going to have a laugh. We're going to have a bit of fun today, and no one better to be doing it with than with Kate Demolder. So I'm very excited to bring Kate on to take us through some iconic pop culture moments from recent Irish history. Kate Demolder is a freelance journalist working across Irish and UK titles such as the Irish Times, the New Statesman, the Currency, and RTE. Her work centres mainly around arts and criticism, something she also speaks about on her podcast, Culture Pigs, which she records with fellow culture journalist Rory Cashin. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram at Kate Demolder. Kate, you're so welcome to the How to Be Irish studio. How are you getting on today?
I am good. Yeah, it's always a brief few moments of horror hearing someone talk about you. But good. Yeah, delighted to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. And today's podcast is probably going to be a little bit lighter to what my listeners are usually used to me covering. So I'm excited for this. It's nice to perhaps have a laugh every now and again.
Yeah, no harm for a bit of brevity, isn't there?
Exactly, that's it. So the way this is going to work is we're going to go through some iconic moments from Irish pop culture. We've decided to cover from the 80s onwards, and because we were brainstorming all week, there is so many iconic moments, but we've had to whittle it down. We've got one per decade, and I hope that they reflect that decade as best as possible. So will we get into it?
We'll get into it. So our first one that we came together on was the 1989 story of when Virgin Megastore got in trouble for selling condoms. And so I wasn't around at this time, neither were you, but I was always familiar with this just because it was so brazen at a time when brazenness didn't seem to exist. And also, as a big fan of reading in the years, I've come across it many times before. But for people who don't know the story, Virgin Megastore, as in owned by Richard Branson, I actually saw he has his own words written about this story on the Virgin website. So I'm going to read it through him. He wrote it almost as if like the way you'd write a story in primary school, what I did over the summer, the day we were arrested for selling condoms in Dublin. So he says, when we were asked by the Irish Family Planning Association, IFPA, if we would let them sell condoms in our Dublin Virgin Megastore, we were happy to oblige. In May 1990, the IFPA were convicted for selling condoms in the Megastore and fined £400. I checked how much that was today. It's about €900, which doesn't seem like a huge amount, but enough to make a point. So the IFPA appealed the conviction on Valentine's Day 1991, and I, Richard Branson, testified on their behalf. On arriving late in Dublin, a policeman offered me an escort and was shocked when I directed him straight to the court. The judge increased the fine to £500 and warned that future infringement could result in imprisonment. A certain rock band known as U2 stepped in to pay the fine, which is something I didn't know. And then he goes on to say about where we were at the time of the world, which I think is really important. So I was looking back at old footage on RTE about this, and he was interviewed about this. And bear in mind, this was the time of the AIDS crisis. And he, quite rightly, looking back at it now, said that the government not allowing the sale of condoms at this time is akin to a death sentence, which I suppose would have been hugely radical with eyes at the time, but with fresh eyes feels so important. I was also looking at what was happening around the time to get a sense, because I feel like culture doesn't exist in an echo chamber. It was the same year that women made male swimmers at the 40 foot allow them in. So the 40 foot is famously like a male bathing spot, and there's still signs all around the place, but this was the time when women were just like, no more. And there was uproar. This was a male sanctuary, and for women to be coming in and flaunting their ways, it was not allowed. It was the time the Guildford Four were freed after 14 years in prison. It was obviously the run up to Italian 90, which feels kind of prescient now with all the talk of Irish soccer and Troy Parrott.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but for the longest time when I was a kid, I thought we won that World Cup because there was so much talk about it.
That's so true. We have to make a big deal out of it.
It was only like shockingly later in my life that I realized it was a quarterfinals maybe. But yeah,
if we're lucky,
I was convinced we won it. There was such a talk about it. Around Europe, communism was collapsing. The Berlin Wall was coming down. So there was a great sense of change in the air, I imagine, all kind of prompting radical moves like this one. And as we were saying earlier, the HIV/AIDS crisis was everywhere. And so for Branson to make such a claim was really, really iconic. And the IFPA were doing what they thought was right as well in the face of danger. So like credit where credit's due to absolutely everyone involved.
It's a very interesting story. I had not heard of it before, and I watched that clip on the RT archives that you mentioned of Richard Branson being interviewed. And yeah, I was really taken aback by that statement that he made, like akin to a death sentence. I thought that was really powerful. I was kind of like, God, kind of pop off, Richard Branson. Wasn't expecting this from you. I mean, it kind of like really points to a time where there was that beginning of that shift around talk of sex and sexuality in Irish
Mm.
culture. And I found this another incredible clip on RT archives of I don't know if you came across this in your research as well, but it was on the Late Late Show, and Gay Byrne, had like some kind of panel discussion, and it was going on for about an hour and a half, and they were talking about condoms. And yeah, it was just like insane to see the audience and their disgust. Like they didn't even want to look at it. I was like, this is crazy.
It's wild because we kind of think in Ireland that we are incredibly liberal, and we absolutely are in many ways. We were the first country to popularise same-sex by popular vote and same-sex by marriage by popular vote, female presidents out the wazoo, all this kind of stuff. But do you remember the Joe Duffy Liveline episode, Post Normal People? That was from
Yes.
2020, and I only listened to it again the other day. And there was a woman in particular speaking about it being like, I don't know why anyone would even go for this show. It's akin to like audition for it. It's akin to soft porn. The girl in it is, I don't know the exact term she used, but she kind of said was so unlikable because she like wanted to have sex with person. So those, like, you kind of fight the mind last in these situations. And so, yeah, there is certainly a hangover from that period.
And to think like that was 1989, and then that discussion around normal people was 2020. It's crazy to think, but
It's also funny that, like, so condoms were legal to purchase with a prescription at that stage. But I was reading different kind of Reddit threads of the time, and I was asking my mom and stuff, and like, you could get a prescription from your doctor, but bear in mind that was kind of at the discretion of the doctor. So if the doctor didn't want to give it to you, they couldn't. And I know, like, I'm from Kildare. There was a doctor in Nace. I think he finished practicing about between 5 and 10 years ago, but I know up until he practiced, he was notorious for not giving you the pills unless you were married. So like, it was kind of at their discretion. And you hear of different stories of like getting, like, jumping through those hoops, getting your condoms from the doctor or whatever contraception you were using, and then going to the chemist and almost fighting that battle again. And there was instances of chemists kind of leaving you standing in the shop awkwardly for 30 minutes hoping that you'd go away. So yeah, it's just fascinating to think back in that time now, when no one would think twice if you saw someone buy a condom in a chemist today.
and in a way, what you were describing there, it reminds me a little bit about around the time of when we were talking about repealing the Eighth Amendment, and they were talking about the specifics of the legislation that would be brought in and such, and they're talking about how it would be at the discretion of the doctor whether or not that they wanted to provide abortion services. It kind of reminds me of that same idea, like kind of fighting a similar battle, like women's reproductive health, yet again, like, only so many years later. We might move ourselves along to the 90s, though,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps a little bit in the same vein, this idea of Catholic shame and such. But what did we choose as the iconic pop culture moment from the 1990s?
Yeah, Catholic Shame, headed up by a pioneer who's a personal favourite of mine. So the Sinead O'Connor tearing up the picture of the Pope on SNL, which was 1992. She was only 26 at the time, which is mad to think now. And I know 26 back then seemed older, but still, like, just so young. So the story goes, she was going on to SNL to promote her new album, Am I Not Your Girl? And so she sang 2 songs. And then at the end of her second song, she begins singing/speaking the words of Bob Marley's song War. And then the camera kind of pans into her and she finishes on the word evil. And as she does that, tears up a picture of Pope John Paul II and throws it on the ground and says, fight the real enemy. In rehearsal, seemingly, she held up a picture of, I think it was a refugee child kind of fighting the power and stuff. And so the SNL team were kind of like, yep, that's fine, we'll deal with that. But apparently there was just utter silence in the studio. And apart from one person who shouted bravo, so I'd like to think that she had one person on her side that night. So she threw that onto the ground, removes her earbuds, blows out the candles, and then leaves the stage. And so at this stage, she wasn't as liked as she had always been in her career. She hadn't really had any hits in the charts for a couple of years. She was kind of at odds with the like bubblegum synthy 80s coming into 90s pop at that stage. Her marriage to John Reynolds had dissolved, and like divorce was still very taboo and stuff at that stage. And previously, which is something I wasn't privy to, when she was playing across America, she refused for the Star Spangled Banner, the national anthem, to be played before one of her shows in New Jersey, which instilled a radio boycott, and also made Frank Sinatra said he'd like to kick her in the ass. And I was like, wow, we were just saying things in the 90s, weren't we? She actually kind of won back because she was asked about this for Esquire, and she said, I can't hit this man back. He's like 78. I'd probably kill him, which is quite good. So I think it's always important to get the context for these times. So in Ireland, we just had Italian 90, the kind of the boom, the first steps of it were growing in after the horrifying 80s. And great men were being toppled. So we had Bishop Eamon Casey, who had just resigned following the awareness that he had a teenage son. Haughey had resigned after successive scandals. So voices like Sinead were continuing to grow, although in Bush's America, she was still this like alienating figure. She wore Rasta outfits and shaved her head famously, and she kind of was the spokesperson for what Republicans would call like outspoken feminists or whatever. So yeah, people were, I would say, frightened and threatened by the sight of her, and then for her to come out with this was just so horrifying. But yeah, several things came in its wake. She was banned from SNL for life. There are video footage of like 2 or 3 trucks driving over her like CDs and records. She got death threats. Her family were convinced she was going to get shot. And then on the next week on SNL, Joe Pesci said, I would have given her such a smack, and got such a large round of applause. So it's alarming. There was actually, the worst thing I saw about her or said about her was in that documentary, Nothing Compares, that a woman, Camille Paglia, I think is how you pronounce it, like so-called feminist at the time and social critic, said in the case of Sinead O'Connor, child abuse was justified. So she was really, really hated at that time, which is just her. And she was dead right.
Yeah, oh my God. I think, if you look on the comments on YouTube of the clip, you can see everybody saying like, wow, she was ahead of the rest. She knew. But I think at the same time, though, in Ireland, we were more aware of the scandals with the church, less so than they were over in America. So perhaps that's a little bit, perhaps what was going on. But yeah, she was always a pioneer. And yeah, it's a very, very powerful clip. It's one that really probably stands out to me. Probably one of the biggest pop culture moments, albeit like a sad one as well.
Yeah. I think you're bang on. I think we almost had a few gateway drugs into this, in that we'd heard about Bishop Eamon Casey. We Christine Buckley had spoken out about the time she'd had in institutional schools. We had, I think in Ireland, we, as if I was conscious, knew that things weren't right, but I don't think that existed in the US as much yet. Like the Boston Globe didn't release their huge investigation until I think it was 2007 or 2008. So she was far beyond that. So yeah, I think we were a bit more aware of what was going on.
This podcast is an entirely independent podcast run just by me. I do everything. I do the organization. I find the guests. I do the recording. I do the research, and I do the editing and the marketing and the producing. Let me tell you, it's not easy. And so if you are here and you're listening to this podcast, I would love if you could tell someone else about it. That would be very helpful for me. Sometimes the algorithms aren't too kind to a small podcast like mine. Trying to get visibility on Spotify as well is really difficult. So if you can do one thing today to help me out, it would be just to let someone know about this podcast. Maybe just share an episode with them that you think they'd enjoy. There's plenty of them to choose from there. I think I have about 22 or 23 episodes to choose from, which I'm so proud of. I can't believe I literally have created 23 hours of content. And let's get back actually into the podcast itself, and let's talk about iconic Irish pop culture moments. Now, perhaps onto the 2000s and something a little lighter, and I don't know, maybe a personal favorite of mine and quite a few others. What was our chosen moment 2000s?
So the millennium had happened, and a year later, 2001, 16-year-old Nadine Coyle was kicked off Irish Pop Stars, and dreams were shattered, all because she lied about her age. So we were just saying off air that this is the one that I remember personally, and to hear the words, I'm Nadine Coyle, I'm from Larkhill in Derry, date of birth 15th of the 6th, 95, making me a Gemini, is just burned into my skull. Never to be turned again. And like, I can still see her face turn and say, what date of birth did I say there? And you're just crushed for her, because she's this girl. Bear in mind, like, the peace process had just happened. Like the ceasefire was a couple of years before this, and she was this girl who had probably grown up in some relative hardship in Derry, and this was her ticket out, and it was being taken away. So like, I've so much sympathy for her.
I've never thought about it in the context of the politics of the
Mm.
time. I only really looked at it from a very surface level perspective, the idea of, pop stars, these famous shows where they would bring together these boy bands and girl bands, the thing of the time. But you really do, your heart
Oh,
breaks for her because you can see it, the sheer panic in her face, but she's trying to keep together. And at the same time, you're kind of going, she is only 16. Like, imagine dealing with that. And the cameras are on you, like, insane.
horrendous. And you can understand why they're legally bound to have someone over 18 in this. And like, when we know so much now about what has happened to kind of the Disney kids or the Nickelodeon kids, that you do want them to have a bit of a head on their shoulders. But it is just so gut wrenching. God love her. And even like, she stayed so steadfast in her beliefs that no, I'm 18. I'm going to call my mom. She's going to bring down presumably some doctored passport, so that I can get through this. And I remember, so like, I didn't even look up clips for this because I didn't need to. I remember so well her sitting in a room with Linda Martin, and obviously the camera crew were like, let's make them think that we're not recording, even though we are, through a crack in the door. And Linda Martin, like, listen, you can tell me, and she's like, no, I'm 18, I'm 18, I'm 18. And then eventually, God love her, she just broke down, and you can just see her packing together all her little tops and jeans, and then being driven out of the house they're in. But yeah, it is desperate.
Yeah, she's absolutely bawling, then getting into the taxi and they're all waving her off awkwardly. And I mean, it's so funny because obviously she went on to join a far more successful band,
Yeah.
Girls Aloud. So, I mean, what's for you won't pass you. This is probably the greatest example of it all.
Mm.
And it's one of those super quotable moments. She's so 2000s, like her eyebrows, like her little string tops, as you said, that she's like folding
Yeah,
into
yeah,
the bag. It's very like Y2K fashion that she has going on. And yeah, the guys from the band, like with their spiked up hair and
yeah.
their flared tracksuit pants, it's actually such a moment in time. Like,
Yeah, it's a real time capsule of a clip. And like, as you say, she goes on to do bigger and better things, which is kind of something I never thought about myself, something to put in the back pocket when something has not gone right in your day. That like, Nadine could have been in Six, but she was in Girls Aloud. But yeah, it was also a time when I suppose things felt really possible for Irish people for the first time to be in a band like this. And there were so many coming out of Ireland, some who made it and some who didn't. But one of the head honchos of all of this world was Louis Walsh, and he was rooting for it if he was Irish. So like, you could change your life, you could change your family's life, you could all of this. But yeah, I suppose at that stage Ireland was kind of on the cusp of prosperity, maybe for the first time. And there was this girl from Derry who like had probably never even been to Dublin before, and then all of a sudden it was just all ripped away. Things worked out, thankfully.
things worked out for her. And you mentioned Linda Martin in the clip as well. Like, she's holding like a big glass of red wine as well. Like, you just would not get that now. There's something so precious about, like, that would never happen now.
Hmm.
It's the scarcity of that, the fact that we know that would never happen again, or we'd never be able to see a situation like that unfold like before our eyes on the thing, like all part of the drama of the live reality TV. And that's what made that kind of time so special. There's so many iconic TV moments from the 2000s, like,
Then we had Brian Dowling for Big Brother as well. This lad from, so as I say, I'm from Kildare and he's from about 20 minutes down the road. So like, things felt possible in a way that they had never before. Like, you hear all this talk of Ireland being the land of saints and scholars, but you never hear of anyone making it now, and particularly not then. Like, to think of the huge difference we have experienced as a country in those 24 years, even in like personal confidence. Like, people emigrate now to make a success of themselves, whereas people emigrated then because there was no other option. And so like, it's just a complete mind shift. And to see Nadine see that all taken away from her is desperate. And also, you were saying you'd never get that now. Like, there was a fierce innocence about people going on reality TV shows. Like, now it's kind of more calculated and seen as like an excellent business move. But you were rooting for them so much back then because they were your neighbor or your babysitter or your dog walker, and they were just trying to make a name for themselves. So yeah, thankfully she's doing all right, I would say.
yeah, absolutely. You're talking about the kind of average person going for reality TV shows. I'm thinking of like Mary Byrne as
Mm.
well. Like, Just people that you are genuinely rooting for, you know where they are coming from is so genuine. And yeah, it's I mean, I suppose this was happening everywhere across the world, but like Ireland being such a small country, and like this globalization was happening on another scale with these kinds of TV shows. And then, of course, the internet, which came at that same time, but really boosted them in the later years. Something on One Direction's career, like, you know, think of Niall Horan. Like, he could have easily been born a few years earlier, went on Pop Stars and, you know, been in Six, but he was in One Direction and that took off loads. So yeah, it was really a time where you could be from anywhere. You could be from Larkhill in Derry, and you could really make it big.
Speaking of Niall Horan, I remember watching that X Factor year and seeing him and thinking like, I know 5 lads who look like you, and like
Yeah.
that didn't happen if they were from another place. Like I was like, I feel like I could meet you in a pub, in a school, in a whatever. So yeah, it was really, really exciting for both the viewer and the, but like equally if you were a viewer as well as a contestant, because you think this could be me, and I don't think Ireland really had that experience before that.
It was a great time to be Irish.
Yeah, it certainly was.
And we might move along to the 2010s. Now, I have to say, when I was looking this one up, I feel like the 2010s, the vibe was like very different
Mm-hmm.
to previous. That it was more of a focus on memes, and I feel like absurdity started to become more of a thing. Maybe it was because we were in this post-economic crash and we're picking up all the pieces and we're trying to make sense of like what we have left of whatever kind of pop culture we had at the time.
Yeah, I feel like personally when I look back at the 2010s, that decade, everything just felt like shock factor. The blondes were bleach blonde, the tans were dark, everything you saw on telly was like a humiliation ritual. Like it was like the saturation was turned up to 10 on everything. And as a result, we've got some excellent memories and not so excellent memories to look back on. But one that kind of shone through in its authenticity was God love her, Theresa Mannion. God love her. She's doing particularly well and she's great. And she is an incredible Irish ambassador, but God love her in this moment because she was clearly of Storm Desmond in Salt Hill. Like, is there anywhere you'd rather be less in the middle of a storm? So yeah, Storm Desmond was about, and it was on her to do a live update for RTE News. And here she's grabbing her earpiece and her Mac and her mic and trying with all of her might to keep eye contact with the camera in an impossible situation, really. Like any camera person with any bit of decency would have been like, no, let's just sack it in. We'll do it from inside a hotel and you can point out the window. But no, she is fearless and steadfast in her beliefs. And I was looking back in Storm Desmond. So Ireland experienced 1 month of rain in 36 hours, and she probably experienced about a week just standing out giving this forecast. Farmland was cut off, everything was flooded, communities were cut off, floodwaters, people didn't have power for weeks. And the only advice we got from Gardaí was don't make unnecessary journeys, don't take risks on treacherous roads, and don't swim in the sea. And she had to repeat that, and it made incredible content that still exists today.
Yeah, and it's really gone global. I think it's like one of those clips that people all over the world like this clip as being one of those iconic news reporter fails, or those like one of those compilation videos. Well, what I love about it is obviously she's just getting bayed up by this rain and this wind, but there's so much going on around her, and I don't think I had actually noticed that until I watched it back again.
Yeah.
There's lads casually walking behind her, which it's no bother to them, like where she's like hanging on for dear life. And then this car just kind of like casually pulls out of its like parallel parking spot. And like there's also so many cars. So I'm like, are these all necessary journeys, guys? Like, so it's just what's the word I'm looking for? Like these two things side by side, like just do not really make sense and add to the hilarity of the whole situation.
Yeah, I can imagine it's one of those things that Ireland is so good at, like seeing the fuss that's made by other places and saying like, sure, there's not a bother in this kind of thing. But yeah, you were saying that like it's kind of gone global. I actually didn't realize how many dance remixes there were.
Yeah.
And I also remember Daisy Edgar Jones, who's kind of an honorary daughter of Ireland. She did her version of it because she was promoting a film called Twisters. And so she did a version of it, which I thought was really, really good. And I also was unaware that she is spray painted, Theresa Mannion is spray painted onto an electric box around there in Salt Hill to kind of, honour her. Yeah.
I must take a look out for it next time I'm in Salt Hill. Yeah, I feel like also around that time there was just so many storms, and recently they had to change the weather warning system because we were having too many red and orange alerts when they weren't warranted, which again is so Irish, like let's make a big deal out of the weather, like, you know. So I think that's why this one is really etched in our memory. It's quintessentially Irish in the fact that it's about terrible weather.
Yeah, I think it also really succinctly speaks to like the nature of viralness, something
Mm.
that was really, really potent. So in that same year, we also had that dress. Is it blue or black or is it white or gold? We had Pizza Rat, that rat that had a big pizza in the New York subway, and the Rory McSorley frost. You wouldn't be long getting frostbite. So like, I feel like we were all seeking the same thing in these videos, and just the year after, I saw kind of big changes to internet culture with kind of encryption and censorship, which kind of changed how things went viral forever and just kind of the nature of it. So yeah, it also like speaks to what I was saying earlier, that we kind of existed on a global stage now in an internet way for kind
Mm.
of the first time. But yeah, that is also to my mind a real time capsule, because things still go viral certainly, but in a very, very different way now.
Yeah, you're not getting like those 10 different dance remixes like
Yeah.
posted to YouTube anymore. That's just not happening. And like same goes like in the same vein, you also had the man who slipped on the ice.
Yeah.
Like that also had the same effect and also was weather related.
Yeah. There was the real sweet spot for us, isn't it?
I don't know who was doing editing in RTE that year, but they were like just having a great
Yeah.
time. Anyways, we might move us along. Oh my god, we're already at the last
I know.
decade. That absolutely flew. Yeah, we've alluded a little bit to normal people so far. I could not believe this. So for the 20s, which we are in right now, we literally have only had 5 years of it. Although it feels like 5 seconds ago that were all locked up in our homes and couldn't
Mm.
go further than a 2 kilometer radius. Normal People became the most streamed show of all time on the BBC, which is insane.
Yeah, wild. I pulled up some figures. So between April when it dropped and December, it got 62.7 million views. And fair enough, I suppose you might think we were all watching so much during COVID, there was nothing else to do. Maybe that isn't significant. But to contextualize that, Killing Eve only got half of that, and MasterChef was only on 20 million. So like it absolutely blew everything out of the water, and very quickly established Sally Rooney, who was also already a best-selling author, but very quickly put her on the world map, and she became known as this. I think the New York Times hailed her as the Salinger for the Snapchat era, and it kickstarted this whole new genre of like conversational, at times unlikable characters through this kind of Marxist lens, but in a really approachable way. It also, I believe, was the first kickstarting of what we now call the green wave, which is something I've heard so much bandied about over the past couple of years that I'm almost becoming allergic to it. But I think it really, really changed Irish culture to the point where it's unrecognizable to where it was in 2019. So you can't watch a TV show now without seeing an Irish person. You have the likes of like Colin Farrell, Andrew Scott, Nicola Coughlan, Barry Keoghan, like Sharon Horgan, Eve Hewson, they're all A-listers. And then on the film side, Paul Mescal, Cillian Murphy, Jessie Buckley's about to be out in this huge film as well, The Banshees of Inisherin. And even we've claimed Ayo Edebri for whatever reason. Someone decided that was allowed. And she seems to be keen on it, which is great.
She loves it.
Yeah. And then in fashion, you've got like Simone Rocha and Jonathan Anderson, who are like the biggest names there right now. And then obviously Kneecap and stuff. The way I was talking about Ireland going on a world map, like we were officially there in 2020 and people wanted to be like us. And we're limited in terms of our age of what that could feel like. But when you speak to someone who is maybe 40 plus, like that was unheard of when they were younger. Someone would want to be like Ireland. There was still like very much an atmosphere of no blacks, no Irish. You would kind of change your accent if you were moving across the world, so you wouldn't be considered like unsophisticated or whatever. Like up until then, I remember like, I don't know, if you were abroad or something and chatting to someone from a different country, they'd be surprised to hear Ireland has electricity or education or things like that. Whereas as now it's become a real passion project to prove your Irishness. And that is something we see in the consistent and constant applications for Irish passports, both in the UK and the US. So it was kind of a counter programming of sorts. And I truly believe Sally Rooney is at the start of it.
I agree with you. I think having COVID and that time and that space to consume content like that, which I suppose deserves that time and that space,
Mm.
it kind of kicked us off. And yeah, just what's followed after that has been insane. I suppose it is worth just taking a look at and going, wow, like we really have come a long way. And even just like what we've touched on here today, you can kind of see a thread of development. You have Ireland in the 80s, you know, it's like economically deprived, and then it's coming into the 90s, you've got your boom, and then you start to see us being affected by globalization and the internet and memes, and you know, we've kind of lost the run of ourselves a little bit, and then it kind of comes back down to, as you mentioned, the land of saints and scholars, like coming back in with that lens of, you know, producing really, really good quality art, whether that be normal people or many films, books, series, music, God, the list goes on and on and on. And I mean, I suppose that's a little bit what this podcast is about, is like kind of capturing that and maybe trying to like unpack that a little bit. The idea of, what is it about Irishness? Why do people want to be Irish? Why do these Americans come over and make their TikTok series of them like driving around Ireland? We're all glued to it going, oh my God, you got to go here. You got to do this. You know, like we love it too. Like we're kind of like egging people on. We're so proud. Like I think, you know, obviously everyone's proud to be like from wherever they're from, but like there's this like extra special sense of pride when it comes to being Irish. Like, and I don't know if it's because we're like a post-colonial country and we fought so hard to get to where we are, and perhaps now we're in this place where we're like, God, fair play to us. We're doing pretty well, aren't we? What do you think about that, Kate? Do you think that people who are proud to be Irish is like, it's more than any other place?
I think you've hit something on the head there, kind of that kind of post-colonial mindset. I think everyone loves an underdog and everyone is going to root for that. And I think we have that built into us in the same way that other countries who were colonized do too. Like you don't root for the UK and the US in the same way that you do for Ireland or small nations, or like, yeah, I'm just trying to think of like countries and islands in the Caribbean and stuff like that. Like I think it's that kind of thing. I do think that there's a part of us that have always been proud to be Irish because we do, even previous to this, we did exist in the culture. Like there was, people always knew where Ireland was, the Fighting Irish, the lands of Satan College, all that kind of stuff. So I think there was always a little bit of us, but now we kind of have the confidence to say it aloud almost. Like, yeah, as I was saying, like it's kind of seen as a counter program. It's almost like a new world order that we used to follow the ways of these big superpowers, but now the superpowers aren't so super anymore. And so we're kind of looking for different ways to exist. And I think in Ireland, we're kind of almost seen as like the good Europeans, whereas you hear of like, I don't know, French cultural icons, maybe saying things that aren't so favorable for things like that. And sometimes you get like Italian football culture is a bit funny, but then when you come to Ireland, all you hear about us on a world stage is that we produce cultural icons, we like to have crack, we play music, and we support Palestine. And people are like, yeah, actually that's not that bad. And also in the news in the past couple of years, all we keep doing is voting progressively and letting more women in, which is just a contrast to everywhere in the world right now. I pulled up a quote from Seamus O'Reilly, who's one of my favourite writers. He's an amazing columnist, both for the Irish Examiner and I think it's the Observer in the UK. And he, there's an article in the New York Times about why kind of Ireland is so hot right now, or Irish culture is brilliant at the minute. And he said that Ireland benefits from being everyone's second favourite country. There's a non-threatening feeling to Ireland. We've never invaded anyone. We've never colonised anyone. What's not to like about that? And I think that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's it. You were talking about like the power of smaller countries and the new world order, and that's definitely been the case more recently, like especially with like conflicts going on in the world. You've had to have these smaller countries come in, and I think Ireland is a great, we're not only a mediator, we stand up for what we believe in as well, and that gives us that extra edge and makes us so lovable. And of course our diaspora is absolutely huge. It helps us connect with so many other countries abroad, and it helps us to export our culture really easily as well.
I think there's also a certain aspect of we don't take ourselves too seriously, and like that can be a bit detrimental as well. Sometimes we don't cheer about ourselves enough, but I think that's very refreshing to a lot of other countries where that isn't the case. But yeah, while there could be times where we could put ourselves out there more, like we were only talking earlier about how horrible it is to be vulnerable, whereas some nations seem to take that in their stride. But I think they're like, I'm a friend of mine who is from the UK, she said to me before that she loves Irish men, not because of what they look like or what they sound like, but she was like, because they don't take themselves seriously. They are kind of like here for a good time as well as a long time. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. Some Irish women maybe have something to say about that, but yeah, certainly.
I definitely have heard quite a few of my friends say that like live over in London, they be talking about dating and stuff like that, and they're just like, these English boys take themselves so bloody seriously. Like,
And like, I obviously don't want to paint them all with one brush, but like, it's almost encouraged to take yourself seriously in certain places where it's almost like a mortal sin here. But yeah, I find it so funny that the whole London thing, being obsessed with Irish culture, like the whole splitting the G and all that kind of stuff. But I've also heard recently that a lot of people based in the UK with kind of Irish links, if they have a surname that's anglicised like Connolly, they're going by like Conneela at the minute. So there's yeah,
really?
it's fascinating to think that that
Wow.
was such a hostile environment for Ireland not 20
Mm.
years ago.
So true. That I hadn't heard about that. And
Mm,
on the Irish, like something that I've noticed recently, like I've had a good few authors on this podcast this season, and so I've been in the bookshops bloody once a week at least. Like they're used to seeing me coming in the door there, but I always look to see like the bestsellers,
mm.
and all the last few weeks, vast majority of the books in the best-selling list are either to do with the Irish language or through the Irish language. And isn't that just incredible?
It's class. And like, so my degree is Irish language and literature. And I remember, so I was in college 2011 to 2015. I remember at the time, like, people not really understanding. They were like, "Did you not get into teaching, or do you want to be a weather woman?" I got a few times, but I just really wanted to become fluent, and so many of those people who didn't understand now are asking me for grinds, which is such a
Mm,
mindfuck. So it's mad, it's brilliant, and I think Irish for a long time had this. People who didn't know any of the language had this idea that it was like this enclosed space which wouldn't open anymore, and now people are realizing it's amorphous, which is amazing. So yeah, it's class. I'm all for it.
yeah, and I think it's great to have an element of like
Mm,
bilingualness or whatever to things. So you don't necessarily have to be like, right, this is an Irish language piece of content or an Irish language media. We must only speak in Irish, and this is English. And I think there's a greater flow between the two. And even like thinking of like Catherine Connolly, right,
mm,
our new president, like she did a great job of that. Like she would begin sentences in Irish and finish them in English. And
mm,
isn't that just lovely? Like, okay, you might not pick up the first part, but you got the second, and then you might have recognized the word from the first part, and you put two and two together, and you say, "Oh, okay, I kind of actually got the gist of that." And like,
mm,
I just say, like, let's do more of that. Let's just bring it into our lives more casually. Like, as you said, like, it doesn't have to be this like, really serious
mm.
thing. It's like, how can we like weave it into our lives a little bit more casually? And like, a lot of those books that I saw in the bestsellers, they are doing that. They're talking about an Irish word a day, or Mancon Megan, like he was like
Oh
just
yeah.
incredible for that. Like the way he would write about the language, bring it to life. I think, he's really done so much work there. We've a lot to thank him for. It's a great, great time to be Irish. But before we wrap up, Kate, I'm going to ask you the question I ask all of my guests, which I mean, after what we've been chatting about so far, I feel like is a nice continuation. What does it mean to you to be Irish?
It's something I've been thinking about over the past few days. And I think what it means to be Irish is to be acutely aware of your history, whether you even are subconsciously or not. Like, I've been reading a lot about the different Irish accents and how they originated with our original clans and tribes. And so to think that that has been passed down and you are so acutely aware of that in your everyday life, like we are aware of the people who built the stone walls, of the people who spoke the language, of the people who fought for our freedom, of whether we even think about it consciously in our day to day. I think it makes us the people that went before us. And particularly in modern Ireland, like I think we are so aware of that we stand on the shoulders of giants, whether it's in kind of the pop culture world, the Irish language world, the medicine world, or whatever. There's dozens of them, but I think we are so tenuously linked to our history and our heritage in a way that not every nation is. We like pulse culture through our veins without even realizing, and countries are jealous of that. And we have it in spades. So yeah, I think it is to be aware of your history in a way that doesn't feel oppressive or inelegant. It just is.
Beautiful. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. That's definitely come up a few times for people. It's the idea of like linking back to your history,
Defo.
thinking about your ancestors and channeling them through, and how we we are today. And how lucky are we to be part or to belong to such an old nation with so much history and so much culture, whether it be Nadine Coyle with the wrong birth date on her passport, like right back to, you know, stone lifting, as I covered on my first episode in this season. Like, it can be frivolous or it can be serious, but it's all of our culture, and we're all very, very proud of it.
Yeah, I think we also do that really well, the light and shade. We can exist in both in the same sentence really, really well. Like, some of the biggest laughs I've had in my life, I've been at funerals, and to think about that, like, and then the opposite otherwise. So, like, I think we, even though we're a nation that feel emotionally stilted at times, I think we're actually the opposite.
We take our time getting there, but when we get there, we're all in. Okay, thank you so much, Kate. Your podcast, Culture Pigs, where can the listeners find it if they want to hear you chatting about some more culture?
Yeah, wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple and Spotify. We also have an Instagram, a TikTok, and a YouTube at Culture Pigs, everywhere you get it. So yeah, please tune in and subscribe.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much for your time today, Gur Mil Mulgut, and best of luck with everything.
Slongaful.
Slán. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I'll be back again next week with another interview style episode related to Irishness and what it means to be Irish. I'll be wrapping up season 2 quite soon, so do stick around until the end of it. Your support is greatly appreciated. As I said at the top of the podcast, if there's someone that you think would enjoy, please do let them know about it. The algorithms aren't too kind, and word of mouth is a very powerful thing indeed that should not be underestimated. So yes, thank you again for all of your support, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed it myself.